Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Positive Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Today we are going to be talking about the R Fantasy bingo board for 2023. So R Fantasy is a Reddit thread over on Reddit, obviously. And they create a bingo board every year that has a bunch of prompts, and it's a lot of fun to try to step outside of your comfort zone. Obviously, as a fantasy kind of newbie, it's not really stepping outside of my comfort zone because there's a lot of things I don't even know about yet, right? So this is something that I did last year, and I hit the hard mode on almost all of them. I think there were 3 or 4 that I didn't. I'm not going to go over the books that I read for each prompt. I have a couple of videos that I'll link down below and in the cards where you can see what I was going to read for them. But if you're curious, here is my final 2022 bingo board with the books that I read for them. It was a lot of fun, and it was last minute that I finished them. But I did. And this year we have a whole new board. The board runs from April 1st to March 31st. I really love these challenges that happen kind of in the middle of the year because end of year we have so much content happening. So this is kind of a nice breakup to kind of go starting in quarter 2. So I'm going to be talking about my TBR for this. Obviously these books can change. They changed last year. And there are some that I don't even have books for yet. So this is also going to be a recommendations video. So if you have anything that you think I would like that'll work, leave it down below. On the first row, the first prompt is title with a title. So someone's title, so a job title, something like that. The hard mode was that it couldn't be a title of royalty, but it could be a title that was bestowed upon somebody. For this prompt, I will be meeting the hard mode with Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is about assassin nuns, so sister would be the title for that. I know very little about this book, but it is a video project that I'm doing, so I'll be reading this. The next prompt is superheroes, and the hard mode is that it couldn't be DC or Marvel. For this, I'm going to be cheating a little bit. It is going to hit the hard mode for sure. It's not DC or Marvel, but it's a novella almost. It's really a short story. It's 20 something pages. That is Warm Up, and it is a prequel novella to the Vicious duology, which might be a trilogy. I don't know. If the third one comes out in this series by the end of the year, then I will use that. But if not, this is a 0.5 prequel short story that I will be using by V.E. Schwab. The next prompt is bottom of the TBR, and there is no hard mode because apparently reading your TBR vets is hard enough. For this, I'm going to be reading How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. This is actually on my April TBR for a TBR vet. So I thought it was a good prompt. There's actually several that I will be reading in April, so I'm going to actually knock off a bunch of prompts this first month, which is good. This one I believe was originally on my TBR for our fantasy last year, so we'll see what happens. I guess by definition that makes this a TBR vet. And this is about a man who is over 400 years old or something like that. He basically can't age, and then he falls in love with a mortal woman and then is trying to figure out how he can age so that he can die with her or something like that. I don't really know. The next prompt is magical realism, and the hard mode was just not one of the recommendations, the top 30 or whatever that they had given. And actually I already read a book for this, and that is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Brittany Choksky. And this is tagged as magical realism on Goodreads, so we're going with it. Magical realism is a very vague definition, especially for readers today, and so there's not really a hard and fast rule. So we're going to count it. Goodreads counts it as magical realism, so we are too. This is about a almost this haunted house, this living magical house, and they go into this underworld through the house. They are still very much rooted in the real world. There are a lot of dark topics in here as well, so please know that going into it. This was not my favorite book in the world. I gave it 3 stars. Magical realism is not a genre that I typically enjoy that often, or fabulism or anything like that. There's just not enough logic for me. But I read it, we're counting it. And then the last prompt on the first row is young adult, and the hard mode is it needed to be published within the last 5 years. which seems like a very easy hard mode, but I've already read it because the first book I read in April was Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This is the second book in the Fireborn series. There's a trilogy, I believe, and this was published in 2021. So this has so far been my favorite book of the month. Not that I've read that much this month, but this was fantastic. Moving down to the second row, the first prompt is mundane jobs. So the main character has just a normal job. The hard mode is that it doesn't take place on Earth. And the other stipulation is that military jobs is not considered mundane because that's pretty popular in fantasy. For this prompt, I am going to be reading Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This does not take place on Earth, and the main character is a barista. The next prompt is, it was published between 2000 and 2009. Which is hard for me because the hard mode is that like it's not in the top 30 of like the best books of that decade or something like that. So currently I do not have a hard mode that fits this. I do have Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This was published in 2006. So it'll count for the prompts, just not necessarily for the hard mode because I think this is like number 1 on the like top recommended books of the decade or something like that. It's gonna count, but it's not. So I might switch this one out. The next prompt is Angels and Demons, so the book just has to have an angel or a demon in it. The hard mode is that the main character is an angel or demon. For this, I think it's gonna count, and that is Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is a like thriller-esque book. This is a book about a man who works in hell and he is trying to get someone to sell their soul to the devil, essentially. I've heard some really good things about this one, so I'm excited to read it. The next prompt is 5 SFF short stories, and then the hard mode is like reading the entire collection of short stories, which isn't that what you would normally do? I don't know. I have several options for this. Currently what I have written down is The River of Silver by S.I. Chakraborty. This is short stories that connect to the Daevabad trilogy, and I need to finish Empire of Gold before I read this one. So this is an option. The other one is Gleanings by Neil Shusterman. This is connected to the Scythe series, which I had put off because I hated The Toll. With like all of my soul, I hated that book. And so I didn't want to read anything else, but I've recently heard some really good things about it by people who also hated The Toll. So I'm hoping that that one will be good, and so that one is also an option. The last prompt on the second row is horror. Obviously it has to be a speculative type of horror. It can't just be like a slasher. But the hard mode is just that it can't be Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft, which again is a really easy hard mode. I have an entire shelf right here of horror books. I have a whole Darcy Coates shelf right here. There's a lot of them. Because I'm planning on using a Darcy Coates in another prompt, and one of the rules is that you can only use the author one time. Currently I have written down The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This is a book that I'm planning on reading for a video project, and it is about like a man who like works as like, he basically is a pallbearer to people who don't have enough pallbearers, and then I think there's like vampires maybe, but it's very meta in the fact that like he's writing a memoir and then someone else is like editing his memoir. Like, no, that actually didn't happen. You're such a dork. That was like really funny. So this is what I have currently. This feels right up my alley. I'm really excited about this one. But I could change this out with so many books because I have so many horror options. Moving down to the third row, the first prompt on there is indie or self-pub, and the hard mode is that it was a self-pub with less than 100 ratings or an indie author that had done a AMA on Reddit. For that, I'm actually currently reading The Tethered Spirits by T.A. Hernandez. This is one of the last books that I have for the SPFBO for this year, which I'm trying to finish by April. And I'm a little over halfway through this, and it does currently have less than 100 ratings on Goodreads. The next prompt is a fantasy book set in the Middle East, and the hard mode is that the author is also from the Middle East or has Middle Eastern heritage. I'm going to be reading The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. The author is from Kuwait. This feels like a gender-flipped Aladdin retelling. I'm really excited about this one. I have been waiting patiently for the audiobook on Libby. Also, the cover is stunning. The next prompt is a 2023 release, and the hard mode being that it is the author's debut novel. I don't have a book picked for this yet because a lot of times, especially with indie fantasy, you don't know about the books well enough in advance. So let me know down in the comments if you know of any 2023 debut releases happening this year, or if anything that you're excited about. Let me know down below. The next prompt is multiverses and alternate realities, and the hard mode is that they do not walk through a literal door to get to said multiverse. There is debate in the recommendations thread if the Kaiju Preservation Society is hard mode, because there's like it kind of glosses over how they get there, but then some people are like, no, it's a door. So there's debate. I don't know if this one fits hard mode. Let me know. There's also the Forbidden Library series, which is Django Wexler's middle grade series, which sounds really cute. And also it's Django Wexler, so I'm going to try to read everything that he writes. These characters are able to get through alternate dimensions and alternate realities through the pages of book, which is not a door. The next prompt is a POC author, and the hard mode is that it takes place in a like sci-fi world, or it takes place in a futuristic setting. For that, I'm finally going to be reading The Blood Trials by Annie Davenport. I have had this on my shelf since it came out. I bought it the week it was released, and I still haven't read it. I have an arc of the sequel. I haven't read this one yet, so I need to do that sooner rather than later. Moving on to the next row, the prompt is a book club or read-along book. This specifically is the R Fantasy, like, read-along. You can do any of the past ones, but the hard mode is that you are reading, like, along currently with them and, like, actually participating in the discussion. They are not great about letting you know what the books are, like, ahead of time. So I don't know what book I'm going to be reading for this one. Then the next prompt is novella, and the hard mode is that it cannot be a Tor.com title, because Tor.com has a lot of fantasy novellas, and that would be way too easy, right? I don't have a prompt for this one as well. There will likely be something. I really like horror novellas, so Nightfire, though a Tor title or a Tor imprint, is not a Tor.com title. So that could be it. Like things like T. Kingfisher generally has like under Nightfire. So that could be an option. I don't know though. Novellas like are really easy to find. I could even do indie ones, because a lot of indie authors will publish their prequels, which are usually novellas, for free. The next prompt is mythical creatures. So it just has to feature some sort of mythical creature in the book. And the hard mode is that it cannot be dragons, which does make it significantly harder. However, I have A Shade of Magic by Tiago Abdallah, which is the second book in the Touch of Light, following Touch of Light. And this, my friends, is a griffin. They were amazing in the first one, and I hear there are many more griffins in this book. So this one is one that I really want to get to as soon as possible. The next prompt is elemental magic, and the hard mode is that it couldn't be V.E. Schwab's Darker Shade of Magic series. So there was also like a Jim Butcher series, which I don't know what it is. So, can't do Dark Shade of Magic. I was watching Cassidy's video, and she is using for this prompt The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and I also need to read this. So if it works, it works. I don't know what this is about though, but it's a very well-beloved book. The next prompt is myths or retellings, which basically just means that I have to read a book that is based on or inspired by a pre-existing story. The hard mode is that it couldn't be Greek or Roman mythology. For this one, I'm going to be reading Windy Darling by A.C. Wise. This is a Peter Pan retelling, obviously. It actually takes place post Peter Pan, and it follows Windy as an adult, but history keeps repeating itself, and Peter has come back for Windy's daughter, and so Windy has to go and save her daughter in Neverland. If you're new to my channel or you didn't know this about me, I love Peter Pan retellings. I have a whole shelf down here. You can't see it, but I have a whole shelf down here of Peter Pan retellings. So even if it's not this one, it's going to be one of those. I don't talk about them a lot on my channel, but I really love them. I don't love the original story, and I don't love the Disney story, but I really love retellings of Peter Pan. Moving down to the final row, the first prompt is a queer norm setting, which basically means that like it's normal for people to be in queer relationships or for people to be queer. And the hard mode is that it's not a futuristic setting, because it's very easy to write in a futuristic setting. So finding books that are set in the past or present with no sci-fi elements in them was a little bit harder. For this prompt, I'm going to be reading A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. I've heard really, really good things about this, and this is a male-male fantasy romance with a political backdrop to it, which sounds like all of my buzzwords. The next prompt is a coastal setting, with the hard mode being like also involving some seafare exploration. Like The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi would be a great one for this. Fortunately, I already read it, but I will be reading The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I have been told that this fits hard mode. I don't know anything about this book, but it was recommended to me for a video, so that's what we're doing. The next prompt is Druids, so like a book that involves druids. I don't have a ton of knowledge on like what this actually means or what a druid actually is and how it's like different from the Fae. I don't really know. The hard mode is that it's like not the Iron Druid Chronicles by someone, I don't know. Wasn't gonna read that because I didn't know it existed. The book I have for this is Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. This is the second book following Silver in the Wood, and I think that there are druids in this, like that they do play some part in it. I don't know though, because like, what's a druid? The other option that someone had put in the Discord was there's like actually a D&D companion novel that's like called The Druid or something like that. I'll put the cover here. So that's also an option, because like by default it has druids in it because it's in the title. The next prompt is robots, and the hard mode is that the robot is the protagonist. There is some debate on the Reddit thread that the Murderbot series is considered robots because they're kind of sentient. I'm counting it. So we're going to be reading Artificial Condition, which is the second book. I'm actually going to be reading this over Peace Talks, so I will have this one checked off this month. And finally, we have the last prompt, which is sequel, with the hard mode being the third book in a series. I have a ton of books that this could work for it. Emperor of Ruin, if I don't end up using Jago Wexler for the other prompt, would work for that. Currently, I have Whispers in the Mist by Darcy Coates as the option for this. This is on my April TBR, so it makes sense to just like knock them off as I go. However, if I switch it up and do a different horror book and use Darcy as the horror, then I would have to find a different sequel. It's a thing. We'll see what lands in this spot. All right, so that's all I have. Those are the books that I'm going to plan on reading for our fantasy. I will do an update probably in about 6 months, see where we're at, and go from there. I will put all of the information for the Our Fantasy Bingo board, and that way if you want to participate in it, you can. There's a bunch of recommendations on Reddit, so if you're having some trouble like finding some books for certain prompts, you can check that link out down below. That is all I have for you today. If you are new here and you haven't yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.